of video games, or indeed any work of fiction, there's nothing like a great opening to sucker you in. You can have the greatest protagonist or sexiest visuals in the world, but if you're not feeding me some stellar gameplay in the first 5 minutes, then I'll be out the door and picking Wimbreys in the hedgerow before you can say wholesome childhood. Portal 2, Sonic the Hedgehog, Bioshock, they all nailed it. Others didn't. Potential unpopular opinions alert, but let's remember that I'm not calling any of these games bad. On the contrary, I'm Peter from WhatCulture.com, and here are our 10 worst opening levels that almost ruined great video games. Number 10, Okami. Whether or not you're into puzzle platformers or classical Japanese culture, Okami brings something to the table for everyone, whether it be a lovely art style, an original storyline, or innovative gameplay mechanics. What it doesn't bring to the table though is a smooth intro. The biggest issue with the opening to Okami is that it's a constant tennis match between playtime and story time. No sooner do you find yourself getting the hang of the gameplay than you get a large unskippable story segment thrust in your face. This game is a real cracker once this chore is out of the way, but reaching the fun part is like trying to get off the mark at the Grand Prix and hitting 3 red lights and a traffic warden before the first bend. Number 9, Deadly Premonition. When a game has graphics as as this, you'd think the devs might try to redeem themselves in other places. In the case of Deadly Premonition, they sort of do, but much later down the line. The world might be uglier than a dead octopus on fire, but it's filled with crazy characters, occasionally frightening monsters, and an intriguing whodunit mystery. Unfortunately, many players never discovered this as they were completely put off by its abysmal opening level, which takes you on a candidly linear journey through a worse than poor imitation of Resident Evil 4's near perfect prologue.
Lárgate, cabrón!
My thoughts exactly. Number 8, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. No, not the train sequence, don't panic comment section. The prologue is glorious and I don't have a bad word to say about it. But this bit, not so much. I've always reckoned that the heist mission that kicks off the main game doesn't really work. Now I love Uncharted 2 and I adore stealth games, so no problems there at all. But the issue is that those two things are probably better left mutually exclusive. Uncharted at its core has always been about this sort of thing, so if you're really going to drag Nate through a dark and dingy sneakathon such as this, at least leave it until a bit further into the game. Naughty Dog decided to needlessly hang fire before they show you just how epic and beautiful this game is going to be. Maybe they were just building up to it, but I'm just saying it's not the best way to reel in the consumer from the get-go. Number 7, Wolfenstein: The New Order. Wolfenstein: The New Order isn't perfect, but it was still a breath of fresh air. It might be the 100th World War II shooter you've played, but the whole thing takes place on an alternate timeline, meaning you're faced with locations and objectives you would never find in the likes of Medal of Honor or the early Call of Duty games. However, first you have to get past level 1, which has 2 distinct phases. Phase 1, 15 minutes of cutscenes and in-your-face scripted events, and then suddenly Phase 2, a wholly unremarkable trip through German fortifications shooting Nazis over and over and over again. Hang tight and the game will eventually throw tons of cool abilities, awesome weapons and interesting missions at you, but level 1 is basically just a cliched D-Day landing scene with a few robots thrown in, which surprisingly isn't actually enough to set it apart. Number 6, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. If we weren't already there, here's where the opinions start getting a bit controversial. I love Oblivion, I really do, and I would not go as far as to say that it has an objectively bad opening when you grade it on all the usual yardsticks of video gaming. However, it's all relative. Compared to the rest of the game, or indeed other comparable titles like Fallout 3 and Skyrim, the Oblivion opening seems to just fall short in my very humble opinion. Mechanically, it feels more on rails than its cousins. Skyrim, for example, presented you with a major story-altering option right from the very beginning. On top of that, while Sir Patrick Stewart does a pretty great job voicing the Emperor, I feel the story on the whole kind of comes across as forced and unrealistic. Oh, we need to use the secret passage in that cell? Yeah, let's not bother moving the prisoner to a new cell and keeping them behind bars. In fact, why not come with us? I smell a road trip. I mean, what if I'm role-playing as a convicted serial killer? There's no way they should be allowing me to just slip out with them like that. Flimsy, Bethesda. Flimsy. Number 5, Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. Raise your hand if you'd like to start a game with a 10-minute cutscene of a doctor giving you bad news, more bad news, and even more bad news, 5 minutes of hobbling through a hospital like a beach dugong before your legs actually start working, and then a horse riding segment? Oh boy, I think Hideo Kojima's finally cracked. 20 years of mind-warping Metal Gear Solid storylines is more than anyone can take. Let's stick him under a cardboard box and give him a rest. Number 4, Kingdom Hearts. God, I'm genuinely having a hard time wailing on all these good games. Kingdom Hearts delivered in so many areas, if you ask me. The world was vibrant and colourful, the combat was meaty and satisfying, the story was pretty original, and Oh wait, yeah, the opening was slow. I mean, it's sometimes tricky to say exactly where an opening cuts off and the main game starts, but to me, the whole of Destiny Island felt like one long prologue full of unnecessary gameplay segments, befuddling cutscenes, and all those stained glass fever dreams. The boss fights were pretty fun, but to me, it all just added up to one great big sluggish introduction. I wanted to be chatting with Donald Duck from Act 1, Scene 1. Number 3, Star Wars Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy. I adore this game. God, I adore it. There are so many memorable missions, cool weapons, and fun as hell force powers. Nothing is more satisfying than using Force Choke to throw a stormtrooper off the edge of the level. Unfortunately, getting to that point requires that you conquer a very wooden opening cutscene and a pretty tedious prologue level. When you then make it to Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy, there's another cutscene that's unnecessarily long and full of flannel intended to introduce characters and establish a plot, and then a clunky Force Powers tutorial. Let me play the game. Things finally pick up after all that, but it's a total sin that it takes so long before I can start doing this, or this, or this. God, I love this game. Number 2, Undertale. Let me take this opportunity to remind you all that this is a list of great games. No Undertale hate from me. In this case, the phrase nearly ruined the game refers less to the overall quality and more to audience retention. Undertale has garnered an enormous following in the past 12 months, particularly amongst YouTube gamers, and the take-home message that all its advocates have is, it gets so good, and therein lies the issue. The main game is witty, quirky, and surprisingly original for a top-down dungeon crawler RPG, but unfortunately, to get to the juicy fruit within, one must tear through the dry husk of a tutorial, grinding through a gauntlet of arbitrary puzzles, frustrating pitfalls, and moments that, until you've gauged the game's sense of humour, seem like they're just mocking you. A shop should put its best gear in the window, but Undertale keeps it all deep inside. And number 1, Driver. Oh my god, this list. The Driver tutorial is absolutely infamous for being an almost game-breaking opening to an otherwise great experience. Driver was one of the first 3D open world titles to hit the PlayStation, and players couldn't wait to finally have all those car chases they'd been dreaming about in the run-up to the game's release. However, before you can get going, Driver presents you with the world's worst piece of paper. Do all of these things in 60 seconds, and you can start the game. Spoiler warning, it will take you 300 attempts, which was enough time for them to develop